Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Succinct Psychology, aka Succinct. My name is Jaia Hendrickson, and this video is going to be a continuation of my two previous videos covering Chapter 9 in Principles of Social Psychology, looking at helping and altruism. So we've learned that the social situation is particularly important in determining whether or not we help. And while personality may not generally be as strong as those of the social context, person variables do matter. And some people are indeed more helpful than others across a variety of situations. And we would say that these people have an altruistic or pro-social personality. An altruistic personality involves both the cognitive and emotional responses that we experience around others. People with altruistic personalities tend to show empathy and sympathy for others and feel it's appropriate and right to follow the norms of social responsibility. These people help more people in a wide variety of areas, including providing help to coworkers, donating organs, and volunteering. And they've also been found to help more quickly than do people who score lower on these measures. Now, you may have already asked yourself an important question regarding helping. Do men or women help more? And perhaps you've already answered this question for yourself. For instance, you might have decided that women would be more helpful because they're typically more in tune to the needs of others, or perhaps you decided that men would be more helpful because helping involves demonstrating bravery and heroicism, and men more likely to desire to be heroes, or at least to look heroic in the eyes of other people. In fact, on average, there is no big difference between men and women in terms of helping. For instance, in one survey on altruism, the percentage of women that volunteered, which was 46%, wasn't significantly higher than the percentage of men that were helping, which was 42%. Rather, there appears to be a person-by-situation interaction, such that gender differences show up more strongly in some situations than in others. The differences depend not only upon the opportunity to help, but also on the type of helping that's required. In general, men are more likely to help in situations that involve physical strength. On the other hand, women are, on average, more focused on other concern, and they're more likely than men to help in situations that involve long-term nurturance and caring, particularly in close relationships. Women are also more likely than men to engage in community behaviors, such as volunteering in the community or helping families. Now, we don't help everyone equally. Some people just seem to be more worthy of help than others. Our cognitions about people in need matter just as much as our emotions toward them. For one, our perception of the amount of need is important. Bickman and Kazman in 1973 found that people were considerably more reluctant to help someone requesting money in the grocery store to buy some cookie dough, which is a relatively luxury item, than when they were asking for help to buy milk, which seems more necessary. In addition to attempting to determine whether help is really needed, we also tend to determine whether people are deserving of this help. We tend to provide less help to people who seem to have brought on their problems themselves, or who don't seem to be working very hard to solve them on their own, than we do people who need help as a result of events that seem to be out of their control. Imagine, for instance, that a student in a class asks to borrow your class notes to prepare for an exam. And then imagine if the student said, "I just can't take good notes, I attend every class, and I really try, but I just can't do it." I'm guessing that you might be more willing to help this student. On the other hand, imagine that the student said, "Well, I miss class a lot because I don't feel like coming, and even when I'm here, I don't bother taking notes every day." I bet you'd be less likely to help this person who doesn't seem to be trying very hard. To this point in the chapter, we've proceeded as if helping is always a good thing, that people need to receive help and that they're appreciative of and thankful to the people who help them. But perhaps this isn't always true. We haven't yet considered the cognitive and affective reactions of the people who are receiving the help. Can you remember a time when somebody tried to help you make a decision or perform a task, but you didn't really want the help? How did that make you think or feel about yourself? Maybe there are costs involved in receiving help, just as there are in giving it. Although people who receive help often really need the help and may indeed feel appreciative and grateful to those who help them, receiving help may also have some negative consequences. When we help another person, it indicates that we have enough resources that we can afford to give some of them to the recipients. It also indicates that the recipient is dependent on our goodwill. Therefore, helping creates a status disparity in the sense that the helper is seen as having a higher status than the person who's being helped. This inequality makes giving help an indication of high status and power, and receiving help a potentially self-threatening experience for the recipient. There are a variety of emotions that help recipients might feel in these cases, including embarrassment and worry that they are or are seen as incompetent or dependent. Research has found that people frequently respond negatively when they receive help and may in some cases even prefer to endure hardships rather than to seek out help. Receiving help then can be a potential blow to our self-esteem. The negative feelings that we experience when receiving help are likely to be particularly strong when the recipient feels that the implication of helping is that they're unable to care for themselves. In these cases, the help is perceived as being dependency-oriented. When the helper takes control of the situation and solves the problem facing the individual, leaving the recipient with little individual to feel like they've accomplished much on their own, the behavior may be seen as indicating that the individual cannot help themselves. The potential recipients of help are likely to reject offers of dependency-oriented help, refrain from seeking it, and react negatively when it is offered. In contrast to dependency-oriented help, autonomy-oriented help is partial and temporary and provides information to the other, for instance, by giving instructions or guidance, or by providing ideas about how to help oneself. Autonomy-oriented help reflects the helper's view that, given the appropriate tools, the recipient can help themselves. Autonomy-oriented help allows the recipients to retain their independence despite their reliance on the more resourceful helper. This type of help is likely to clash with help recipients' view of themselves as capable people who can help themselves. Although almost every culture has a social responsibility norm, the strength of those norms varies across cultures. And these differences relate well to what we know about individualism and collectivism. In one 1990 study, Miller, Bursoff, and Harwood found that children and adults in the United States, a Western and therefore individualistic culture, were less likely than children and adults in India, an Eastern and therefore collectivist culture, to believe that people have an obligation to provide assistance to others. The Indian respondents believed that there was an absolute requirement to help, whereas the Americans offered their helping more selectively, even for their own friends. Similarly, Barron and Miller in 2000 found that Indian students were more likely than U.S. students to view donating bone marrow to save someone's life as morally required, whereas U.S. students were more likely than Indian students to say that donating was a decision that the potential donor had to make him or herself. One important difference between Eastern and Western cultures is that the importance of self-concern versus other concern is higher in the latter. In fact, the strong individualistic norms in cultures such as the United States make it sometimes inappropriate to try to help others in cases where we don't have a personal interest. Rebecca Ratner and Dale Miller in 2001 had participants read a scenario in which a governmental funding agency was planning to reduce funding for research regarding a disease. The disease was said to affect only women or only men. Then the participants were asked to indicate both whether they were opposed to the reduction in funding and how comfortable they would be in attending a meeting to protest the funding decreases. In terms of their attitudes toward the reduction in funding, there was no significant gender differences. Men thought that funding should be maintained even when the disease only affected women, and vice versa. However, as you can see here in the graph, when asked how comfortable they would feel attending a meeting protesting the funding decreases, significant differences arose. The men predicted that they would feel less comfortable attending a meeting to protest the funding reductions when the disease only affected women, and the women predicted that they would feel less comfortable attending a meeting to protest the funding reductions when the disease only affected men. Ratner and Miller argued that in Western cultures there's a norm of self-interest that influences whether or not we feel that we can be involved in actions designed to help others. It's simply inappropriate to lend help to others unless the person is personally involved in the issue and thus stands to benefit. Further, participants in another study by Ratner and Miller reacted more negatively to an individual's altruistic behaviors when they didn't appear consistent with his or her self-interest. So we see here in the graph we have blue representing male and the red representing female, And in the disease only influences women condition, we see that the men were less comfortable attending a meeting that would protest the decreases. And then we see in the disease only influences men condition, women were less comfortable going to meetings that would be protesting the decrease in funding. Because again, those two would be going against the self-interest of men and women. Alright folks, this is going to conclude my third and final video covering Chapter 9 of Principles of Social Psychology. I hope you guys found it informative, and I'll see you guys in the next chapter.